benedicta tu in mulier.
Hi, and welcome to Historia Ecclesiastica. My name is Daniel Sudi. In this video, we will examine the history and an overview of the 24 local churches of the Catholic Church, the 24 rites of the Catholic Church. This video was first posted within a longer video about St. Thomas the Apostle. If you'd like to watch the full video, that's also available on the channel. This video will cut into the middle of that St. Thomas video when we begin examining the 24 rites of the Catholic Church. Okay, God bless you. Enjoy. Church, being one unified church under God and being one unified church led by the Pope, does not mean that there needs to be only one set of rituals that we all have to follow. There is flexibility in the church's worship to adapt certain rituals to the religious genius of particular churches. And this leads us into a discussion of the various rites of the Catholic Church. So in the Catholic Church today, there are a great number of rites, and we're going to talk about each of the different rites of the Catholic Church, how they formed, and we'll talk about a few of the unique characteristics of the different rites. So what exactly is a rite? A rite is a set of rituals. That's where the root R-I-T comes from. So this is a great graphic from the Baltimore Catechism. You can see the Roman Church has primacy amongst the church simply because the leader of the Roman Church is the Pope. The Pope is the foundation of the church, and so there is a hierarchy here. As you can see here, this ladder does not have any particular order. It's just trying to show that the Pope's kind of on top, but it's not like the various churches are actually ranked in this manner. But all of the most antique and important churches of the world are in communion with the Church of Rome and the Pope. So this is just showing a variety of different churches that are all in communion with the Pope. And once again, they're not listed in any order. Around the world, we can say that God has inspired his one Catholic Church to develop various rites to celebrate the diversity of the human people, which God enjoys various different cultures when they are all within the boundaries of sound truth and morality. We could say that diversity is enjoyed by God, and we could say that that diversity is enjoyed by God in the various ritual traditions of the church, because each one can emphasize something different but authentic about the one true faith. So it's important to know that the various rites of the church, the distinctions between the rites, are not there to celebrate the differences between people. They're all there to celebrate the glory of God. But different people and different cultures have different strengths and weaknesses, perhaps, more so strengths, let's say, in worshiping God. And so it's fitting that different cultures are permitted to worship God in unique ways within the boundaries of morality and truth in order to give God more glory in a particular area. Okay, so each rite has a certain strength that they offer to the worship of God. A rite is a liturgical and canonical tradition. Liturgical means the manner in which each different rite prays is slightly unique, and then canonical means the manner in which that rite governs itself is somewhat unique. There are different particular rules about the requirements, let's say, for how a priest is trained, or the requirements that a priest has to fulfill. There's different there's different rules or governing policies within the rites, but there's also different liturgies or manners of praying, the divine office, and the sacraments, all within the boundaries of authentic tradition and truth. Each rite, as I just mentioned, has a different liturgy of the hours. Most rites call their liturgy of the hours an office because the word office, officium, is Greek for work. So the divine office is the divine work of the church in offering up the 150 psalms to God regularly. Most offices pray all 150 psalms per week. That's kind of the ideal, but not all do. The modern liturgy of the hours in the Roman Rite, it doesn't pray the imprecatory psalms on regular basis. Those are not included in the Liturgy of the Hours. Certain psalms are missing verses as well because they're deemed to be imprecatory. And also the Liturgy of the Hours prays the it prays the Psalter, not the complete Psalter, on a 4-week cycle rather than a 1-week cycle. Most Eastern Orthodox offices are going to pray all 150 psalms on a weekly cycle, so it's quite a bit more prayer. It does allow the Liturgy of the Hours to be a little bit more accessible to lay people, which is, I guess, an advantage, that lay people can participate in this more easily. It's only 5 prayers a day, and each one takes about 10 minutes, so it's quite doable. Each church also, as I said, has their own set of canons. The word canon means rules or canon laws. Is it good that there are so many different rites in the Catholic Church? Would it not be better if all of the different people of the world worshipped in the same exact way with the same liturgy? Well, God does love unity. Certainly, God also does love diversity when it is authentic diversity. And I'm just going to write a note about that because diversity is turned into an idol in the West quite oftenly. So we're going to talk about the actual merit of diversity for a moment. In modern Western societies, unfortunately, many regard diversity, such as having a diverse friend group, having diverse employees, diverse characters in a cast, or even having diverse college students in a college promotional. Many regard this to be a sort of moral virtue. Is diversity in itself a virtue? When well-ordered, diversity can be advantageous in the manner in which having a diverse assortment of people with different backgrounds and cultures can offer fresh perspectives on a topic which emphasizes a true element. I work with a diverse group of students. I've learned a lot from their cultures. I have a diverse group of friends, thankfully. I just live in Metro Detroit. It's an extremely diverse area, so I have a lot of friends that are different cultures and whatnot. And, you can learn a lot from someone of a different culture. They offer a fresh perspective. I don't think people sometimes have an attitude where it's like, well, the other culture is always right, my culture is always wrong. That's not intelligent, Of course, truth is found where truth is. You shouldn't always be like eating dirt about your own culture, like a lot of Western people are. But regardless, you can learn a lot from people of a different perspective. But diversity can become disordered when it becomes an end in itself. Pursuing diversity can sometimes supersede the desire for truth. In the Church's liturgical rites, it is assumed that all rites are entirely orthodox, and therefore the diverse manners in which these rites worship God and govern themselves can offer a unique perspective and emphasis on the one eternal truth and the one eternal faith. So as long as all the different rites are remaining within the boundaries and the guiding light of orthodoxy, which is the authentic faith of the apostles, then great. They can all offer a fresh perspective. But if we begin to make diversity an end in itself, and let's say there was a failed attempt in the 1970s to create a so-called Hindu rite where there was going to be elements of Hinduism incorporated into the Catholic worship in India, that's really bad, right? So that's making diversity an end in itself instead of making truth and the one true faith the end. So that rite would have been a disgrace, and that's why, thankfully, God did not permit that rite to form. Is unity a virtue? So if diversity is not a virtue but is advantageous when well ordered, what about unity? Is that a virtue? Is it always good to pursue unity? Well, we read in Psalm 132, verse 1, "Behold how good and pleasant it is for brethren to dwell in unity." Unity is an effect of charity, though. When one loves the other, they seek not only their good, but union with them. So if we are in fact being charitable and loving, we will desire unity with others. But unity can become disordered. If unity is prioritized over truth, if one insists on unity in the event in which there must be division in order to distinguish between truth and falsehood, in this case unity is not meritorious. In 1 Corinthians 11:19 we read, "For there must be divisions among you, in order that those who are genuine among you may be recognized." While we can and should have charity for all, we cannot avoid dealing with severe moral or doctrinal errors in order to pursue unity. So if there is a bishop that is teaching something that is legitimately heretical and has been condemned by the church, or that goes against the church's teachings in any way. Other bishops cannot ignore those errors for the sake of unity. In that instance, unity has become disordered. Unity is not an end in itself. Charity is the end of all of our moral actions. And in the event that someone is in grave moral or grave doctrinal error, charity demands not unity with that person, but actually it demands reproof because you love the soul and you want them to repent. If you desire unity with them in this passing, fleeting world, and as a result of desiring that fleeting unity in this world, you refuse to reprove them, you won't be unified with them for eternity. You're allowing their soul to be cast into hell if you're not doing anything to help them when they're in grave error. What we want is unity in heaven, and sometimes unity in heaven requires division while on earth. In Western nations, unity cannot be prioritized over significant and necessary conflicts over the lives of unborn children. I'm bringing this up because a lot of the times in even a lot, good faithful Christian circles, people say we need to pray for unity in our country despite political differences. We need to pray for eternal unity with our political opponents, and that will require, in the current state of Western civilization, division while on this earth. If there are people who vehemently, endorse and encourage robbing the unborn children of their right to life, or if there are people that are vehemently advocating for destroying the bodies of gender dysphoric youths, or if there are people that are vehemently advocating to upend the dignity of authentic marriage, we can't have unity with those people where we just gloss over those differences. We have to be willing to say, I can't go there. You're wrong about all these things. And we need to have a peaceful conflict over these things, because these things are absolutely abhorrent, and they're putting the souls of anyone who advances those causes or belongs to political movements which advance those causes in grave danger. So we can't just gloss over these objective differences in order to create an artificial unity which will divide us for all of eternity. And like I said, we cannot avoid tensions over heresies in the church. We must allow there to be divisions amongst us in order that those who are genuine to be recognized. So with that said about, a little bit about diversity's proper ordering and unity's proper ordering, let's talk about the church's 23 rites, which are well ordered and are therefore good and should be celebrated because they are all within the boundaries and the guiding light of orthodoxy, and each of the rites offers us a fresh perspective about how to worship the one true God. So this table shows, I'll try to get rid of I can't get rid of my little camera here. If you want to take a screenshot, you could, but I just want to get this out of the way. I can't though. So if you want to take a screenshot though, or if you want to, become a member, I'll send this to you. This table shows each of the rites of the Catholic Church, and it shows which apostle these different rites have an association with. I won't say each apostle formed these rites because the liturgical traditions that each of these rites have, they all come later than the ministries of the apostles. I believe each of the apostles would have established a more primitive liturgy, which you can kind of see outlined in the Didache of the apostles. And then in these various regions, the cultures and the bishops of these regions kind of developed the distinctive liturgies which we know today. Regardless, each of these rites have their kind of origins with whatever apostle first evangelized to the people there. And it is possible that some of the distinctive elements of these various rites were formed by these apostles. I created a separate chart for the Byzantine rites because the majority of the Eastern Catholic rites are in fact Byzantine, or celebrants of the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. Each one of these rites typically have the name Greek added to their rite, and the first word in each rite is kind of what nationality celebrates this rite. Generally, these rites do celebrate parts of their liturgy in their own native language, but then they're celebrating the official liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, which is the liturgy of Constantinople or Byzantium. We can break the rites down into various liturgical families, and so each of the liturgical families will be shown with a burgundy background, and then we'll have tan for all the particular rites. And let's get right to it. So the first liturgical family, and perhaps the most ancient, is the Syriac liturgical family, speaking some form of Syriac language, such as Aramaic, the language that Jesus spoke, and the language that the people of God spoke ever since their exile amongst the Chaldeans. Aramaic is the language of the Chaldeans still to this day in Iraq, and it was the language of Jesus because the Chaldean Babylonians put the Israelites into exile and forced them to speak Aramaic while they were there, and that remained the lingua franca of the Jewish people to the time of Jesus. So the East Syriac Catholic Church. All Syriac rites refer to the Mass as the Qurbana, or sacrifice. A variety of liturgies are celebrated within this family, but notably is the Liturgy of St. James in the Church of Jerusalem, which by tradition was written by St. James himself. It is reasonable to posit that this rite extends out of the earliest liturgical customs of the apostles in Jerusalem. The Bishop of Antioch is the patriarch of the Syriac Catholic Church. But in the ancient church, in the 6th century, the Bishop of Antioch rejected the Council of Chalcedon and the teachings about the two natures of Jesus hypostatically unified by his divine person. A new patriarchate was established, however, in the wake of this heretical decision by the Patriarch of Antioch. The new patriarchate did accept Chalcedon. This patriarchate, which was pro-Chalcedon and celebrated. This patriarchate, which accepted Chalcedon, then established communion with Rome in 1649, and the modern Syriac Orthodox Church was established in order to maintain a state of schism. But the authentic pro-Chalcedon Patriarchate actually did convert and become Catholic. There was an offshoot of Orthodox that did not want to accept communion with Rome. Even though it was the official Patriarchate who accepted the papacy in the 17th century, there are only 150,000 Syriac Catholics today, and there are approximately 2 million Syrian Orthodox Christians. At the same time, when we say Syrian Orthodox, that describes both East Syriac Orthodox and West Syriac Orthodox. And so in the Catholic Church, we have the West Syriac Catholic Church, which we've just been talking about, and then we also have the Chaldean Church, is the East Syriac Catholic Church. So the Syrian Orthodox is one body that is the same people. So basically there's two Catholic rites, the West Syriac Catholic Church and the Chaldean Catholic Church, and then in the Orthodox side of things, they just have the Syrian Orthodox Church. So there's 150,000 Syriac Catholics who are West Syriac Catholics, and then there are 2 million Syrian Orthodox. The Syriac Catholic Church is sometimes called the East Syriac Rite, and that would, of course, as I just mentioned, make the Chaldean Church the West Syriac. I have that backwards. I'm sorry, guys. Been really messed up here on this slide. So the rite that's centered in Antioch is the West Syriac Catholic Church. The Chaldean Church would be the East Syriac Catholic Church. All right, the Chaldean Catholic Church, the East Syriac Catholic Church. The Chaldean Church prays in Syriac, once again a dialect of Aramaic. Today it is centered in Baghdad, Iraq, although many Chaldeans have migrated to the United States, especially in the Detroit area and San Diego. It is centered in the Cathedral of Our Lady of Sorrows in Baghdad. Ethnically, Chaldeans have ethnic origins with the Chaldeans or Babylonians of the Bible, who conquered the chosen people under Nebuchadnezzar and, of course, stole Job's camels in the book of Job. The Church of the East, as mentioned before, was established by St. Thomas the Apostle and St. Jude. They had a complicated relationship with the papacy, which was weakened further in the ancient church by the Persian Empire severing communication between local bishops and Roman prelates. The Persian Empire had no interest in a religious sect in their empire communicating with Rome, who was a political rival of the time. And this further caused the Chaldeans to enter into schism in the ancient church. In the 5th century, this was made worse by the fact that Chaldean patriarchs accepted the heresy of Nestorianism, which taught that Jesus was both a human and divine person, and Mary was only the mother of the human person, Jesus, not the divine person, the Logos. Throughout its history, rival patriarchs have claimed authority over the Church of the East, so there's been kind of mini schisms within the Chaldean church. But these patriarchates varied in which ones were or weren't in relationship, communion with Rome over the medieval period. There was interest in restoring communion with Rome in the late medieval period. And in the middle of the 19th century, the papacy was able to regularize the right to be led by only one patriarch. And finally, the Chaldean church was firmly in communion with Rome beginning in the 19th century. There are approximately 2 million Chaldeans worldwide, with 500,000 in the United States, as I said, mostly in Detroit and San Diego. I feel privileged to have a pretty intimate relationship with the Chaldean community here in Detroit. The school where I teach has about 60% or maybe about half of the student population is Chaldean, so I've enjoyed getting to know their culture a bit, and I really appreciate the deep-seated faith and the values of the Chaldean people. Once again, there are approximately 2 million Syrian Orthodox Christians, and once again, the Syrian Orthodox Church is the equivalent to both the Chaldeans and the West Syriac Catholics in terms of their liturgy. Now, the Syro-Malabar Rite is the Catholic ancient rite in India. It was established by St. Thomas the Apostle and was later influenced by Chaldean missionaries. For much of its history, the Syro-Malabar Christians looked to the Chaldeans as their patriarchs. But after the Portuguese settled in southwest India in the region of Goa, the Latin bishops claimed leadership of the Syro-Malabar Rite. Tensions existed under this arrangement for centuries, and leadership ultimately transferred back to the Chaldean Patriarchate from the Latin bishops in Goa. Eventually, under Pope Leo XIII, the Syro-Malabars were granted liturgical independence. Today, it is led by a major archbishop. Today, there are approximately 4.5 million Syro-Malabar Christians. There are approximately 500,000 Malankara Orthodox, which is the Orthodox equivalent of this Catholic rite. The Alexandrian Coptic Rite. The Alexandrian Rite is the liturgical tradition which emerged from the Church of Alexandria, Egypt, established by St. Mark. Today, the Alexandrian Rite has two branches: the Coptic Catholic Church in Egypt, which uses Coptic, and the Ge'ez Rite, which uses the Ge'ez language, which is used in Ethiopian and Eritrean Catholic churches. So it's all one liturgical family with a similar liturgy, but different languages. The Ethiopian and Eritrean churches are two distinctive Catholic churches, which we'll talk about in a moment. Officially, their liturgical books were written in Ge'ez, but they use distinctive vernacular languages in their celebrations as well, since the vernacular is permitted throughout the entire Catholic Church, regardless of rites. The Ethiopians, when they use the vernacular in their liturgy, they celebrate in Amharic, and the Eritreans in their liturgy celebrate in Tekregna. While some Copts signed the Cantato Domino at the 15th century Council of Florence, they did not establish lasting communion with Rome, as many Orthodox did not, as a result of Florence, even though on paper communion was established. So the Coptic Catholic Rite was established formally and in a lasting manner in 1741 when the Coptic Orthodox bishop Anba Athanasius converted to Catholicism and was appointed the apostolic vicar to the Coptic Catholics. In 1899, the Coptic Catholic population grew to the point in which a patriarchate could be established under Bishop Cyril Makarios. Today, there are about 210,000 Coptic Catholics worldwide, and there are about 30 million Coptic Orthodox worldwide. The Ethiopian Ge'ez Rite, which we just talked about, this rite has two local churches that celebrate it, the Ethiopian and the Eritrean particular churches. In 1839, Catholic missionaries from the Lazarist and Capuchin order had some success in Ethiopia. One of these missionaries, Saint Justin de Jacobis, gained permission to celebrate Mass in Ethiopia according to the Alexandrian Rite in the Ge'ez language, in order to offer the same liturgy that the Ethiopian Orthodox offered, but in a manner which was in communion with Rome. In 1849, he was appointed the apostolic vicar to the Church of Ethiopia, thus establishing an independent particular church of Ethiopia in the Catholic Church. There are about 70,000 Ethiopian Catholic Church members today. Today, in contrast, there are about 36 million Ethiopian Orthodox Christians. In 2015, in response to the 1993 independence of Eritrea, Pope Francis established an independent Eritrean Catholic particular church. Today, its bishop is Archbishop Mengistu Tesfa Mariam. There are about 180,000 Eritrean Catholic Christians and approximately 3 million Eritrean Orthodox Christians today. The Armenian Rite. The Armenian Catholic Church was established by Saint Bartholomew, and it is today led by the Armenian Catholic Patriarch of Cilicia, which is a city in Asia Minor, otherwise known as Turkey, today. And so it's interesting that he also, the Patriarch of the Armenian Catholic Church, has his episcopal residence in Beirut, Lebanon. So it's kind of curious that the Armenian Catholic Rite is not centered in Armenia, but in Turkey and Lebanon. And the reason for that is persecution. During the Armenian genocide of the 20th century, a number of Armenian Catholics were sent into exile, and the Armenian Catholic Patriarchate has been outside of Armenia ever since. Now, in the ancient days, the Armenian Church rejected the Council of Chalcedon, once again rejecting that Jesus is only one divine person, stating that he is both a human person and a divine person, making him two persons. But they did make some attempts to re-enter communion with Rome during the Crusades. On paper, the Armenian Church accepted the Council of Florence, but in practice, the clerics, bishops, and people of Armenia remained in schism. Missionaries had some success in converting Armenians to Latin Rite Christianity. One Armenian cleric, Abraham Pierre I Ardzevian, converted to Catholicism just before being elected to a patriarchal position. He would become the head of a newly established Armenian Catholic Church in 1742. Armenian Catholics celebrate the Armenian liturgy in their native tongue. This liturgy was first composed by Saint Gregory the Illuminator. There are approximately 130,000 Armenian Catholics and approximately 9 million Armenian Apostolic or Orthodox Christians. The Greek liturgical family. All of the Greek rites developed liturgically within the sphere of influence of the Patriarchate of Constantinople, first established by Saint Andrew the Apostle. After the fall of the Western Empire in 476 AD, Constantinople became an extremely important liturgical and intellectual center of Christianity. Its influence during the early Middle Ages is still evidenced by the great number of ethnic churches which celebrate the Byzantine liturgy of St. John Chrysostom to this day. The Albanian Greek Rite. Originally, Albanian Christians looked to the Pope as the Patriarch. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III condemned the Byzantine Emperor Leo III's iconoclasm. As a result, Emperor Leo liturgically annexed the entire province of Illyricum, modern-day Albania, from Rome. And Rome was not powerful enough to really counter this, and so Albania came under the liturgical influence of Constantinople. All the same, the Albanian Latin Rite Catholics persisted in northern Albania, and today most Albanian Catholics are Latin Rite. Beginning in the 17th century, Catholic missionaries had some success converting Orthodox prelates in southern Albania, but the Ottoman rulers actively resisted an establishment of a Catholic rite. Catholic Byzantine Rite Albanians continued to worship in communion with the Pope, especially in the 20th century, yet they lacked their own Catholic rite due to political pressure until the fall of the Soviet Union. A rite was established in 1992, but by 2020 it was no longer classified as a local church and was reclassified as an apostolic administratorship. Today, it contains only 3,200 members. In contrast, there are approximately 400,000 Albanian Orthodox Christians, but as we mentioned, most Albanian Christians are Catholic. The Italo-Albanian Catholic Church is a distinctive particular church. It celebrates the same liturgy of St. John Chrysostom with a combination of Koine Greek and Albanian in their liturgy. These Albanians fled persecution by the Turks in the 15th century and settled in southern Italy and Sicily and in the monastery of Gartaferreta in central Italy. In 1577, Pope Gregory XIII founded a Greek college of St. Athanasius to educate its clerics. These Albanian Christians had already accepted papal supremacy, and they were granted the distinction of being a particular church in the 18th century by Pope Benedict XIV, and they've retained that distinction ever since. Today, there are around 80,000 Italo-Albanian Greek Catholics, and of course they have a very close association with the Albanian Greek Rite, the Belarusian Greek Catholic Church. At the 1596 Union of Brest, a number of Byzantine Orthodox Christians residing in the Ruthenian region in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth accepted full communion with Rome, establishing a number of Byzantine Rite Catholic churches. This church, at times, is called the Belarusian Unaite Church, due to the origin this church has in the Union of Brest, as a particular Catholic church, that is. The Greek Belarusian Catholic Church retained its Belarusian identity in a period in which Polonization and Russianization of the area tended to corrode Belarusian identity. Ultimately, once Belarus was absorbed by the Russian Empire, most Belarusians unfortunately became Russian Orthodox due to political pressure. Today, 12,000 Belarusian Catholics are members of this church. In order to show the numbers, 83% of Belarusians today identify as Orthodox, mainly Russian Orthodox, and only about 7% identify as Catholics of any rite. The Ruthenian Greek Rite is typically what is meant by Byzantine Catholic. Most people are referring to the Ruthenian Greek Catholics. The term Ruthenia is not a modern-day country. In the Middle Ages, it was a common Latin exonym for the Kievan Rus people, and so it's what people that weren't Russian called the Russians, basically. So Ruthenian, in a way, has an association with Russian Orthodoxy, but it's been very different for a very long time, and so not really. Later, the term Ruthenian came to be applied to people from Belarus, Ukraine, and eastern Poland, and some of western Russia in the Commonwealth of Poland and Lithuania. So it kind of comprises a diverse group of ethnicities. The Ruthenian Catholics accepted the gospel from St. Cyril and Methodius in the late 9th century and observed the liturgical practices of Constantinople ever since. They also followed Constantinople into the Great Schism. At the 1646 Union of Uzhhorod, 63 Ruthenian clergymen, and later entire communities of Orthodox, were accepted into the Catholic Church. Today, most Ruthenian Catholics are ethnically Rusin, originating from the Carpathian Mountains of the Ukraine. So there is an association ethnically with the original Russian people there. Today, there are over 400,000 Ruthenian Catholics. In contrast, there are approximately 50,000 Czech or Slovak Orthodox Christians, which is a Orthodox church in approximately the same area. Once again, when people refer to Byzantine Catholics, the most common type of Byzantine Catholic Church, especially in the United States, is Ruthenian Catholic. All right, the Bulgarian Greek Rite. The Bulgarian people accepted Christianity in the 9th century. Tsar Boris was planning to accept the liturgy and customs of the Latin Rite originally, but after an invasion by the Byzantine Empire during a time of famine, he was pressured into submitting his nation to the Patriarch of Constantinople. I bring up that point because a lot of people tragically convert to Eastern Orthodoxy because they have the impression that it better resembles the church, the ancient church. And the reason that there is this impression that the ancient church was more like the Orthodox than like the Catholic Church is because beginning in the 5th century, the 4th century, the Western Empire began to decline economically, and Western Europe did not recover economically or politically until probably like the Renaissance, the 1200s, the 1100s. And so from that entire period, from the 5th century, 6th century, all the way till the 12th century, you have economic dominance throughout Europe by the Byzantines. And so they're kind of exerting their own right out over the rest of Europe. And in a lot of ways, they were beginning to usurp the legitimate authority of the papacy for their own political goals. And so, if you look back at the early church from the first 3 centuries before the Western Empire began to fall and the Western economy and began to collapse, you'll see that the church, it's not exactly let's say this, there's more overt references to the papacy, and the church seemed to be more, not really Latin or Eastern in the way we think of them today, but there was more overt references to the papacy. Once Byzantium began to rise in dominance, though, explicit references to the papacy were sort of suppressed by political pressure from the Byzantine emperors. Anyways, let's get back to it here. This is just one example of that, where we have Tsar Boris, the leader of the Bulgarian people, wanted to submit his nation to the Latin rite, and then the Byzantine Empire invaded and forced him to submit to the liturgical rites of Constantinople, which, they weren't in schism yet in the 9th century, so this is still better than being pagan, of course, and there's nothing wrong with being Eastern Rite either. In the 9th century, it wasn't heretical or whatnot, but it was drifting in a direction of schism. Tsar Simeon the Great declared an independent patriarchate, establishing the Bulgarian Greek Church in 917 AD. In the early 13th century, communion was established between the Bulgarian Church and Rome, but tragically this was lost after the Ottoman invasion. In the 19th century, great numbers of Bulgarian Christians wavered between communion with Rome and Constantinople, trying to play these Christian centers off of each other to attain greater ecclesial independence. In the 20th century, Archbishop Angelo Roncalli, who later became Pope John the 23rd, helped formally establish the Bulgarian Catholic Church. Today, there are 50,000 Bulgarian Catholics. The Greek Catholic Church of Croatia and Serbia. This particular local church consists only of the Greek Catholic Eparchy of Krishevski, which governs churches in Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and the Greek Catholic Eparchy of Ruski Kruster, which governs parishes in Serbia. It was formed by members of the Greek Slavic as they fled Turkish persecutions in Bosnia and Slovenia and settled in Croatia. They celebrate the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom in the Old Church Slavonic language. As a result of the political reorganization of the 1990s and 2000s, several other Greek rites have recently been established out of the Greek Catholic Church of Croatia and Serbia. Today, this rite contains about 21,000 members. There are approximately 10 million Serbian Orthodox Christians and approximately 130,000 Croatian Orthodox Christians. It is worth noting that there are many Latin Rite Croatian Catholics as well, so it's not like all the Croatian and Serbs are Orthodox. The Macedonian Greek Catholic Church. In 2001, the Macedonian Greek Catholic Church was established as an independent entity out of the former jurisdiction of the Church of Serbia and Croatia. Today it is comprised of only one eparchy. This church celebrates the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom in Macedonian. In 2017, the Macedonian Greek Catholic Church contained 8 parishes. It had 16 priests and around 11,000 members. In contrast, there are about 1.3 million Macedonian Orthodox Christians. The Melkite Antiochian Greek Catholic Church. So we already talked about the West Syriac Catholic Church, which is centered in Antioch. And there is another rite of Christians, of Catholics, that are centered in Antioch, but they celebrate the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and so they're considered a Greek Catholic Church, even though they're centered in Antioch. They're sometimes called the Antiochian Greek Catholic Church. So there are 2 different rites celebrating 2 different liturgies, both centered in Antioch. Actually, there's a third we'll talk about in just a second. The Melkite Catholic Church represents those Christians with origins dating back to the Church of Antioch who embraced the liturgical and spiritual traditions of Constantinople. These Christians derive their names as an insult. The Syrian root for Melkite meant royal, and non-Chalcedonian Syriac Christians accused the faithful Christians of Egypt and the Levant as being unwittingly submissive to the official council of the Byzantine emperor, and basically not being free thinkers like they were. You want to be free to believe the truth, not error. And so the Melkites were, this term was a slur because they were seen as being like traitors to the Syriac people and the Syriac church and embracing Constantinople instead. In 1724, Patriarch Cyril VI Tanas accepted full communion with Rome. But those members of the Antiochian Church who rejected communion with Rome formed the Antiochian Orthodox Church as a breakaway sect. So this was a second Antiochian patriarch who submitted his church to communion with Rome, even though there was a massive break-off movement of those that didn't want that as a result. He did the right thing, even though I'm sure it was a huge cross for him to deal with so many of his people leaving the church and forming a schismatic sect. Today, Melkite Catholics reside in Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel and Palestine, and also in diaspora around the world. There are 1.6 Melkite Catholics worldwide, and there are 1.6 million Melkite Catholics, not just 1.6 Melkite Catholics. And there are 4.3 million Antiochian Orthodox Christians worldwide as well. The Maronite Church is a rite of Christians that emerged out of the Melkite Catholic Church. The Antiochian Syriac Maronite Church is seated in Berkerke, northeast of Beirut, Lebanon. It is the most dominant Catholic rite of Lebanese Christians. This rite developed around the charismatic leadership of Saint Maran. After the Council of Chalcedon, the monks who carried out his legacy, Saint Maran was a monastic, vigorously defended his teachings and the teachings of the Council of Chalcedon about the hypostatic union and the two natures of Christ. Because of persecution and conflicts in the Middle East, today 2/3 of the world's 3.5 Maronites live outside of the Antiochian region. To this day, the Maronite Rite Church remains a strongly monastic rite. Its monasteries are an essential element of their spirituality. It is, in a sense, the monastic branch of the Melkite Greek Catholic Church. The Maronites celebrate a unique liturgy, the West Syrian or Maronite liturgy, which is centered around the anaphora of the 12 apostles, which is also featured in the liturgy of St. Chrysostom, but has other elements as well. So the Maronite Rite and the Melkite Rite are both the Catholic equivalents of the Antiochian Orthodox Rite, and there are 3.5 million Maronites, and there are 4.3 Antiochian Orthodox. So if you're keeping score, that is more Antiochian Catholics when you combine Melkite and Maronite than the Antiochian Orthodox. The Hungarian Greek Catholic Church. Ruthenians and Serbian Catholic Christians had long had a presence in Hungary due to persecution from the Turks. During the 17th century, as Catholic Protestant wars ravaged Europe, a large number of Latin Rite Hungarian Catholics began worshiping in the Eastern Rite churches. Ultimately, these Christians began to celebrate the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom in Hungarian. This unique practice persisted, leading to the establishment of a distinct local church in the year 1912 with the establishment of the Eparchy of Hajdarog. Today, there are close to 200 Hungarian Greek Catholic churches with about 330,000 members. There is no Hungarian Orthodox Church. Notably, most Hungarian Christians are Latin Rite Catholics, not Hungarian Greek Rite Catholics. The Slovak Greek Catholic Church. In 1646, the Union of Uzhhorod sealed communion between the Pope and liturgically Byzantine churches in Slovakia. After the Soviet Union conquered these territories, the Eparchy of Mukachevo held a sort of kangaroo synod in which corrupted clerics voted to sever communion with Rome and submit the Slovakian Church to the communist puppet Patriarchate of Moscow. After the fall of communism, most of these churches returned to communion with Rome, although some remained in Orthodox schism. Today, there are about 200,000 Slovak Greek Catholics, and there are about 50,000 Czech-Slovakian Orthodox Christians. The Romanian Catholic Church. After the Habsburgs conquered Transylvania, the Metropolitan Athanasie Angel accepted full communion with the Pope by the Act of Union of 1698. A synod of Romanian bishops accepted this act of communion in 1700. Under communist rule, the Romanian Catholic bishops and priests were placed under tremendous pressure to convert to Orthodoxy. Those that refused were often imprisoned or killed. These Christians celebrate the Byzantine Rite of John Chrysostom in Romanian. Today, there are about 500,000 Romanian Catholics, and there are about 14 million Romanian Orthodox Christians. The Russian Greek Church. The Russian conversion to Christianity in the 10th century was to a unified Christian church. There is no evidence that the Russian church entered into schism until its definitive rejection of the Council of Florence in the mid-15th century. Russian poet and philosopher Vladimir Sergeyevich Slavoyov, I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, called for communion with the Pope. In 1894, the Russian priest, Father Nicholas Tolstoy, made a profession of faith, entering into communion with Rome. Ukrainian Greek Catholic Metropolitan Bishop Andrei Shepetsky attempted to convert a good number of Russian prelates and Old Believer clergy in the late 19th century. The Russian Peter the Great made some reforms to the Russian Orthodox Church during his reign, and those that refused to accept those reforms formed the schismatic sect, the Old Believers. And so there still are Old Believer Russian Orthodox in Russia. They're kind of a distinctive church from the Russian Orthodox Church. And the Ukrainian Metropolitan we just talked about tried to convert both of them to establish communion with Rome. After religious tolerance was granted to Russians in 1905, Russian parishes in communion with Rome began to sprout up. These were organized into a Russian Greek Particular Church in 1929. But due to extreme persecution by the Soviet Union, only 3,200 souls of this Russian Greek Church remain today. There are, in contrast, approximately 90 million Russian Orthodox Christians. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church was also born of the Union of Brest in 1596, which established communion between the Ruthenian Church and Rome. Once again, Ruthenian shares a root with the term Rus. This Uniate Church was broken up when the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was annexed by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Those Christians of the Uniate Church who were absorbed by the Austrian Empire were ethnically Ukrainian and were eventually recognized as such. Traditionally, the Ukrainian Church celebrated the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom in the Old Church Slavonic, though many churches today translate the liturgy into Ukrainian, or even English. Today, there are 5.5 million Ukrainian Rite Catholics. There are about 20 million Ukrainian Orthodox Christians in contrast. The Latin Rite, also known as the Roman Rite. The Latin Church is the most dominant particular church in the world, not only of the Catholic Church, but of any Christian body. There are approximately 1 billion Latin Rite Catholics today. It is comprised of the liturgical and canonical traditions which are tightly regulated by the Pope and the Church of Rome. Once liturgies began to standardize after the Peace of Constantine, the Roman liturgy developed into its mature form, centered around the Roman canon. Today, Rome has deemed it prudent to institute a more simple and even perhaps flexible liturgy to reflect its nature as a global, multicultural rite. Because it's perceived that there is a value to allowing different cultures to express their own religious genius and their worship of God within the boundaries of Orthodoxy. The Latin Rite is the most flexible rite in the world today because there are cultures all over the planet that celebrate it. That was the thinking behind instituting the Novus Ordo, and of course you could have your concerns that the flexibility of the Latin Rite missal provides room for heretical forms of worship, and we see that, unfortunately, a lot in Western civilization. But that is the thinking behind the flexibility, that this is one rite that includes everybody from, Jamaicans to Americans to Mongolians to, Nigerians, so to Peruvians. So there's a need to allow some flexibility for those different cultures to kind of worship in a way that allows them to express their unique perspective on the eternal truths. Please consider watching How the Last Supper Became the Traditional Latin Mass on this channel, in order to learn more about the full development of the Latin Rite liturgy from the Last Supper to the present day. There are over 1 billion Latin Rite Catholics, compared to about 18 million Eastern Rite Catholics. So obviously, there are far more Latin Rite Catholics than Eastern Rite Catholics. There are approximately 3,000 Western Rite Orthodox Christians, and so that's a tiny little section of Orthodox that practice the traditional Latin Mass, but are in a state of schism, not in communion with Rome. There are a few other Western rites that are a part of the Western Church. The Ambrosian Rite is one of the rites that's celebrated in the city of Milan. Ambrose of Milan, the teacher of St. Augustine, and the Ambrosian Rite, named after him, likely dates back to the 5th century, at least as Pseudo Ambrose, a writer of that period, referred to it in De Sacramentis. And this rite presents us with a glimpse of the Church, which certainly had much in common with the Roman Rite of the 4th century, although the Ambrosian Rite is not necessarily a mirror image of 4th century Roman practice. So it is basically the liturgy of the city of Milan, and so it was probably very similar to the Roman Rite. It is a Western Rite, but it does have some distinctions. Some hypothesize that since Milan was the cultural center of the Western Roman Empire in the 4th century, that Rome may have actually followed the lead of Milan in its liturgical manners. So this could be kind of an ancestor to the Roman Rite, perhaps. In all essentials, the Ambrosian Rite is the traditional Latin Mass, with the exclusion of the Roman chanting style, and it has a Greek style of chanting instead. It does not have the Agnus Dei prayer, since that was added to the Roman Rite in the 7th century, and it has a different version of the Kyrie eleison chant, because a late 6th century borrowing, because the Roman Rite borrowed, or basically established the Kyrie eleison in the TLM's form in the late 6th century. There are also certain other ceremonial differences. Red cassocks are used, and there are 6 weeks of Advent, and the processional cross faced backwards rather than forwards. The Roman canon was basically identical, but it had a different list of saints and a few other unique distinctions. Both, interestingly, included the phrase "a mystery of faith" in the consecration of the precious blood. Approximately 5 million Catholics in the Church of Milan exclusively celebrate the Ambrosian liturgy, which is a distinct rite, but not a distinct particular church. It is a part of the Latin Church. The Masoretic Rite, which is also called the Hispanic Rite and was once called the Visigothic Rite, describes the rite which was once common throughout Iberia, or Spain, but was eventually relegated to the city of Toledo after the Reconquista. Dolmerius Ferrotin, OSB, considered the Masoretic Rite to be a snapshot of general Roman Rite practices of the 6th century, stating that it was essentially the Roman Rite Mass in its ceremonies and prayers, with the exception of its proper prayers, readings, and hymns being all different. The Masoretic Rite had a tendency towards elaborate liturgy, which was not found in the ancient Roman Rite. The Eucharistic prayer varied in the Masoretic Rite. Here are some of the... I don't actually have that quote, sorry about that. You can read this article in New Liturgical Movement, the Masoretic Rite Canon to Communion and Dismissal. That goes over those differences. That's a great website, by the way. Whereas the Roman Rite continued to develop throughout the remainder of the first millennium, the Masoretic Rite was frozen from further developments due to oppression by Moor invaders. Today, it is still celebrated throughout Toledo and occasionally throughout Spain. This rite is typically not permitted to be celebrated outside of Spain without special exceptions. Again, it is a distinctive rite, but is a rite of the Latin Church and is not a particular, distinctive local church. There are various inactive rites as well. The Gallican Rite described the type of liturgy which was once celebrated in modern-day France, amongst the Gauls who used to live there. It is a slightly adapted version of it was used in the British Isles and Ireland, and it was probably used by the evangelized Irish, who then evangelized the rest of Europe during the Viking Age, when many people were losing their faith during the Viking Age. The Gallican Rite contains some prayers which seem to have been inspired by Byzantine prayers. There was a certain preference for the elaborate, mysterious, or ceremonial in the Gallican Rite that was not found in the Roman Rite. But in reality, the Gallican Rite, some might say, can't really be described as an actual rite, It was more of a vague outline of the Mass, similar to what St. Justin Martyr described in his first apology. There was no unifying center of liturgical life in Gaul, and so the Mass varied vastly from city to city and province to province in the region of Gaul. Numerous councils were held throughout the first millennium to try to regularize the Gallican Rite, such as the Council of Vannes, Agde, Vayasan, Tours, Auxerre, and the two councils of Massan. Gallican bishops were constantly writing to Rome for advice on how to settle liturgical disputes, and so in a sense, the Gallican Rite was plagued with liturgical chaos for centuries. Eventually, Charlemagne the Great would regularize worship throughout his empire by simply requiring all the different provinces of his empire to celebrate the Roman Rite, and this brought an end to the Gallican Rite. The Celtic Rite is also an inactive rite. It describes the liturgy celebrated by the Celtic peoples of the British Isles, Ireland, and possibly Brittany of France. They practice the sacrifice of the Mass in a very similar manner to the Gallican Rite or the Masoretic Rite. It was kind of a general structure that mirrored the Roman Rite of Rome, but had much variation in its choice of readings, its construction of prayers, its style of music, and its choice of hymns. Some attempts have been made by neo-Protestant groups, Anglicans, and Western Orthodox Christians to argue that the existence of a Celtic rite indicates the existence of a non-Roman Celtic church. But this is contradicted by the fact that Celtic bishops participated in synods such as the Council of Arles in 314 AD, which dealt with the Donatist heresy, and the Council of Rimini in 359, which was a synod in Italy, whose conclusions were ultimately rejected by the Pope for Arianist tendencies, although most of the bishops in attendance were in fact faithful Orthodox Catholic bishops. So they were attempting to come up with a conclusion. The Pope ultimately rejected it, but the fact that Celtic bishops were there indicates they were trying to be in communion with Rome. Celtic Rite bishops often did request the intervention of the Pope in liturgical manners, eventually leading to a gradual Romanization of the Celtic liturgies, causing the end of the Celtic Rite, and today in all these regions, people celebrate simply the Latin Rite. The final Western rite we can talk about is the Dominican Rite. And so the Dominican Rite is the rite which is exclusively used by Dominican priests and brothers. It is licit, but it is not exactly active today, as the Dominican order officially practices the Novus Ordo Mass, sacramental rites, and the Novus Ordo Liturgy of the Hours. The Dominican Rite, some believe the Dominican Rite incorporated certain lost elements of the Gallican Rite. The Dominican Rite was developed mainly as an attempt to standardize Dominican mendicant forms of worship. Since the Dominicans had spread throughout all of Western Europe, it became very difficult for Dominicans to conform their liturgical worship to however the liturgy was celebrated in a particular city, because there were variations in the late medieval period before Trent in various different cities. And so they established the Dominican Rite just so Dominican priests could celebrate one form of liturgy no matter what city they happened to be in. Some unique characteristics of the Dominican Rite include the shorter prayers at the foot of the altar, a much earlier preparation of the chalice, different hand gestures throughout the Roman canon, and during the offertory, the bread and wine are held up and offered to God simultaneously. So what about the Great Schism? Was there in fact actually a Great Schism in 1056 AD? That is a great story for another time. This is one of the longest videos I've ever made, so we better wrap it up. Let's get going back with the story of St. Thomas, but I will eventually make a video about the Great Schism and the Council of Florence. It's important, though, just to wrap up our talk about the rites, that licit rites do exist in communion. Oh, and if you heard me say it's a long video, that's because I'm originally filming this joined to a video about St. Thomas the Apostle, but I will be posting the video about the rites all by itself, and so you could watch just, the video all about the rites, but I will also post this video about the rites inside of a longer video about St. Thomas the Apostle. To wrap up, though, licit rites exist in communion with the Pope that embody the spiritual genius of the various Eastern traditions. And so for that reason, anyone who is attracted to Eastern spirituality has a moral duty to perhaps worship in a Eastern Rite Catholic Church in communion with Pope. No one has a licit, valid reason to become schismatic because of their interest in Eastern spirituality. We also pray, of course, that the Great Schism may end soon, and all theological and ecclesial errors be expediently resolved between the leaders. Let us pray for union between the Eastern churches who are still in schism and the Catholic Church. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O Mary, Mother of mercy and refuge of sinners, we beseech thee to look with pitying eyes on heretical and schismatic nations. Do thou, who art the seat of wisdom, illuminate their minds wretchedly involved in the darkness of ignorance and sin, that they may know that the Holy Catholic, Apostolic, and Roman Church to be the only true Church of Jesus Christ, out of which no sanctity or salvation can be found. Finally, complete their conversion by obtaining for them the grace to believe every truth of our holy faith, and to submit to the sovereign Roman Pontiff, the Vicar of Jesus Christ on earth, that thus, being soon united to us by bonds of divine charity, they may make with us but one fold under one and the same pastor, that we may thus, O glorious Virgin, all sing exultingly forever, Rejoice, O Virgin Mary, alone thou hast destroyed all heresies in the whole world. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. This will be the end of the video about the different rites of the Church. I'm going to continue now with the story of St. Thomas the et Spiritus Sancti. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio et nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Well, God bless you, and I hope He keeps you safe and happy throughout this week, and may He remove from your mind anything I've said, unfaithful to Him or untrue. We'll see you next time. God bless you, and bye.